As your presence. And we're thankful for the change of seasons and for the measure of rain that we've had and for the cooler weather. When the seasons change, we are always reminded that you are in control. It's your power. And we thank you for that. Be with us this morning as we study. Help us to reach a better understanding of your word. It's through Jesus we pray. Amen. We want to pick up the study this morning in chapter 34 of Genesis. The heading of chapter 34 in my Bible is called the Dinah incident. And it's the recounting of the rape of Jacob's only daughter, and the man responsible wants to marry her. And the brothers come up with a scheme and take supreme vengeance on that. If we just look at that story without any context, at least for me, it's what's it all about? What makes that incident rise to the occasion of being important enough to be included in our Bible? If you just read that totally without context, it's an awful story. There are no winners. Everybody loses. But if we put it in context, it makes a little bit of sense. And I want to start off by reviewing the events of the last few chapters with one thought in mind, with one common theme. So if you would turn to chapter 28. When you read verse 15, "Behold, I am with you and will keep you wherever you go and will bring you back to this land." The thing I want to focus on and as a theme for this is bring you back to this land. "For I will not leave you until I have done what I have spoken to you." God has met Jacob here at the place of Bethel. Jacob is on his way to Haran after doing all of his shenanigans to trick Esau out of his blessing. And both Rebekah and Isaac have told him to leave, go to Haran to find a wife. Okay? Significant here is, number one, the place, Bethel. We're going to see that as we go through the next few chapters, that God does not have the same kind of conversation with Jacob again until Jacob returns to Bethel. And he's made all kinds of promises here. He has reaffirmed that he is the God, and he's the God of promise. And he's going to do that again, but not until Jacob comes back to Bethel. Okay? Let's go to 31. Jacob has been in Haran for a number of years. He has worked for Laban for 7 years. For the first 7 years, it turns out he was working for Leah to be his wife. He was wanting Rachel, but through trickery, it was Leah. So he had to work another 7 years to get what we will call his loved wife. And then he finally worked another 7 years to gain a lot of property and people and servants and animals. So in verse 31, chapter 3, God says, "The Lord said to Jacob, return to the land of your fathers and to your family, and I will be with you." Return to your fathers and to your family, and I will be with you. Let's go to 33. Actually 31, I'm sorry. I'm left-handed, so I'm reading notes that I wrote right-handed. Okay, and I'm still in the wrong place. Go to chapter 32. Jacob has met Esau on his way back. He was afraid of what was going to happen, but that meeting went well. So they have met, or they're in the process of meeting. Then Jacob said, in verse 9, O God of my father Abraham and God of my father Isaac, the Lord who said to me, return to your country and your family, and I will deal well with you. So that is Jacob's charge at this point. He is to return to his land and to his family. Now skip down to Genesis 33. We'll pick up the reading in 15. And Esau said, now let me leave with you some of the people who are with me. They've had their meeting, it went well. Esau is wanting to leave some of his servants with Jacob. But he said, what need is there? Let me find favor in the sight of my Lord. So Esau returned that day on his way to Seir. And Jacob journeyed to Succoth, built himself a house, and made booths for his livestock. Jacob doesn't seem at this point to be in any real big hurry to return to his land and to his family. The best I can do with Succoth is that it is still east of the Jordan. It is not in the land of Canaan. Yet Jacob is here making some permanent type moves, building a house, building places for his livestock. He's simply not heeding the call to go to the land and to his family. Verse 18, then Jacob came safely to the city of Shechem, which is in the land of Canaan. At least now he's crossed the river and he's over into Canaan. When he came from Paddan Aram and pitched his tent before the city, and he bought the parcel of land where he had pitched his tent from the children of Hamor, Shechem's father, for 100 pieces of money. Then he erected an altar there and called it El Elohe Israel. He has still not met his family. Yes, he's met Esau, but Esau came to greet him while he was on the journey. He has finally at least made it to Canaan. But what did he do? He bought a parcel of land. As far as I know, the only parcel of land that the Hebrew people have bought is when Abraham bought the caves to bury Sarah. Again, he seems to be making plans for a more permanent place to live, yet he has not yet completed that journey that God had told him to do. Okay? So now we'll pick up 34. Now Dinah, the daughter of Leah, whom she had borne to Jacob, went out to see the daughters of the land. And one of the first things that we notice in this is that Dinah, certainly she's the only daughter that we know about that Jacob has. She was born of Leah, which we would call the unloved wife of Jacob. And as we go through the story, through these series of events, the only people that are named in this story by name are Dinah and her two full brothers, Simeon and Levi. Does that play a part in the events? Don't know. But it's interesting that they are the major players in this event. Is there anything wrong with going out to see the daughters of the land? Here we have a young lady growing up. Jacob's family at this point is complete except for Benjamin. So one girl in the family of 11 other brothers and half-brothers. Is there anything wrong with her going to see the daughters of the land? Daughters of the land would be Canaanites. Is there anything wrong with her being allowed to go? That's a question. Okay, we got one over here, Bill. Miss Woolley.
It would have been surprising in my day for my parents to have let me go to a situation like that, especially unaccompanied. So I would think that probably somebody accompanied her, or she went without permission and was maybe not looking for trouble but found trouble.
Yeah. You know, I think that's a good point, and that's why I tried to ask the question in two different ways. One, we don't know all the events of why she went, you know. She may have asked permission, she may not have. And we're going to go through some review of looking at the relationship between the Hebrews and the Canaanites. You know, if we go back through Abraham's experience, he absolutely refused to consider having his son marry a Canaanite. We look at Isaac's experience. He and his wife did not want their sons to marry a Canaanite. Esau did marry two Canaanite women, and they were problems for the family. Okay? Let's skip ahead a little bit to Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy chapter 7. Beginning in verse 1. When the Lord your God brings you into the land which you go to possess, and has cast out many nations before you, the Hittites, the Girgashites, the Amorites, Canaanites, Perizzites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites, 7 nations greater and mightier than you, when the Lord your God delivers them over to you, you shall conquer them and utterly destroy them. You shall make no covenant with them, nor show mercy to them. Nor shall you make marriages with them. You shall not give your daughter to their son, nor take their daughter for your son. For they will turn your sons away from following me to serve other gods. You know, we're not given, at least in the patriarchal time, the reason that God wanted the Hebrew people to stay separate from those around them. specifically the Canaanites. But the reason that's given here in Deuteronomy was present back then. He knew the consequences. One more. Let's go to Joshua 23. Begin reading in verse 11. Therefore, take careful heed to yourselves that you love the Lord your God, or else, if indeed you do go back and cling to the remnant of those nations, those that remain among you, and make marriages with them, or go into them and they to you, know for certain that the Lord your God will no longer drive out these nations from before you, but they shall be snares and traps to you, and scourges on your sides, and thorns in your eyes, until you perish from this good land which the Lord has given you. God wanted his people to remain pure. Now, we can't say certainly for certain how much of this they had been told. We know that they were at least aware of the fact that they should not marry these foreign women. And we see in the later readings the reason is that they would be led astray. God wanted his people to remain pure. Now, how much of that did Dinah know? How much of that did Jacob know? He certainly knew that the history was that his family should not be marrying Canaanite women. That was consistent from Abraham through Isaac. Okay. And when Shechem, the son of Hamor the Hivite, prince of the country, saw her, he took her and lay with her and violated her. His soul was strongly attracted to Dinah, the daughter of Jacob, and he loved the young woman and spoke kindly to the young woman. So Shechem spoke to his father Hamor, saying, "Get me this young woman as a wife." We're never told anything about what Dinah was thinking about this. All that we know is that she remained in Shechem's house throughout all the negotiations that we're going to read about. The brothers actually had to go to Shechem's house to rescue her. Now Jacob heard that he had defiled Dinah, his daughter. Now his sons were with his livestock in the field, so Jacob held his peace until they came. It's kind of interesting. It says Jacob held his peace until they came. And yet as we go through the remainder of this reading, Jacob really has no part in it. He does not, according to what we read, there is no record of him having any part of the negotiations. Then Hamor, the father of Shechem, went out to Jacob to speak with him. And the sons of Jacob came in from the field when they heard it, and the men were grieved and very angry because he had done a disgraceful thing in Israel by lying with Jacob's daughter, a thing which ought not to be done. But Hamor spoke with them, saying, "The soul of my son Shechem longs for your daughter. Please give her to him as a wife, and make marriages with us. Give your daughters to us, and take our daughters to yourselves, so that you shall dwell with us, and the land shall be before you. Dwell and trade in it, and acquire possessions for yourselves in it." Now, if you just read that totally out of context, that's, might say a pretty good deal. Trying to make the best of a bad situation. But we know that's exactly what Abraham and Isaac had been trying to avoid. And we see later on that that continued through the conquering of the land. Then Jacob said to her father and her brothers, "Let me find favor in your eyes, and whatever you say to me I will give. Ask me ever so much dowry and gift, and I will give according to what you say to me, but give me the young woman as a wife." He sounds pretty desperate, willing to pay anything. This specific circumstance is codified in the law of Moses. Does anybody remember what would be the price of the wife in this case? You're to pay 50 shekels of silver. You are to marry the woman. And there's one other condition. Under this set of circumstances, there is no divorce in the law of Moses. And that is in Deuteronomy 22, if you want to check that out. It's kind of interesting that this specific circumstance is mentioned and taken care of. 50 shekels of silver, marriage with no possibility of divorce. Verse 13, but the sons of Jacob. Now, we don't have any identification of whether it's all 11, whether there's a spokesman. We don't know how they came to any agreement, but they answered Shechem and Hamor his father and spoke deceitfully because he had defiled Dinah their sister. And they said to them, "We cannot do this thing to give our sister to one who is uncircumcised, for that would be a reproach to us. But on this condition we will consent to you, if you will become as we are. If every male of you is circumcised, then we will give our daughters to you, and we will take your daughters to us, and we will dwell with you, and we will become one people. But if you will not heed us and be circumcised, then we will take our daughter and be gone." It's kind of interesting that only the physical aspect of circumcision is noted here. The conversion or turning to God is not discussed. It's not a part of the condition. It's simply the physical aspect of circumcision. I read one commentary that was adamant in believing that this was a condition that was proposed by the sons of Jacob that would be considered so extreme they would not even consider it. You know, I don't really see how you can get there to make it where they would not consider it, but they spoke deceitfully. And the words pleased Hamor and Shechem, Hamor's son. So the young man did not delay to do the thing, because he delighted in Jacob's daughter. He was more honorable than all the household of his father. This is the one bright thing, the one positive thing that's said about anyone in this entire chapter, is that Shechem is considered more honorable than all the household of his father, because he was willing to marry Dinah. And Hamor and Shechem his son came to the gate of the city and spoke with the men of the city, saying, "These men are at peace with us. Therefore, let them dwell in the land and trade in it. For indeed the land is large enough for them. Let us take their daughters to us as wives, and let us give them our daughters. Only on this condition will the men consent to dwell with us, to be one people, if every male among us is circumcised as they are circumcised. Now look at verse 23. Will not their livestock, their property, and every animal of theirs be ours? This is how Hamor and Shechem sold the deal to the people of the city, that they would acquire all of the material riches of the Hebrews. Exactly what they were warned about in the passages that we read in Deuteronomy and Joshua. They would be assimilated, only let us consent to them, and they will dwell with us. And all who went out of the gate of his city heeded Hamor and Shechem his son. Every male was circumcised, all who went out of the gate of his city. You know, the material things that they were going to get were good enough for them to agree to this. Now it came to pass on the third day, when they were in pain, that two of the sons of Jacob, Simeon and Levi, Dinah's brothers, each took his sword and came boldly upon the city and killed all of the males. You know, it looks like we've got two untrustworthy factions dealing with each other here. On the one hand, they were willing to do this, Shechem because of the girl, but everybody else because of the material things they were going to give. And then the brothers simply wanting revenge. And they killed Hamor and Shechem his son with the edge of the sword, and took Dinah from Shechem's house and went out. They did take their sister from the house. The sons of Jacob came upon the slain and plundered the city, because their sister had been defiled. They took their sheep, their oxen, and their donkeys, what was in the city and what was in the field, and all their wealth. All their little ones and their wives they took captive, and they plundered even all that was in the houses. A total destruction. And this is the next time that we see Jacob. You know, we don't see him as having any part in the negotiations. And this is really going to be somewhat of a common theme with Jacob. We're going to see some additional instances as we go through the next few chapters where he just seems to be missing in action as far as making any decisions or being involved. The question is asked by some commentators, would it have been different had these children been children of Rachel rather than Leah? That's one of those speculative things that you can only think about. I suppose it's possible. But for some reason, he was just simply missing in action. Then Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, "You have troubled me by making me obnoxious among the inhabitants of the land, among the Canaanites and the Perizzites. Since I am few in number, they will gather themselves together against me and kill me. I shall be destroyed, my household and I." He apparently is quite concerned about the results of this. He knows that his little band of family are far outnumbered by the inhabitants of Canaan. When word gets out what they're going to do, he's concerned about the consequences. And the brothers can only say, "Should he treat our sister like a harlot? should he treat our sister like a harlot? I want to go a little bit into 35 here and then maybe review and get some of your thoughts. Then God said to Jacob, "Arise, go up to Bethel and dwell there, and make an altar there to God who appeared to you when you fled from the face of Esau, your brother." Certainly, the end product here is something that puts Jacob back on the path to doing what God had told him to do. That is, return to your land and to your family. Any comments? Any thoughts? Any concerns? It's an awful story in the sense that there's just not any winners as far as the human players, except for the fact that Jacob and his family are now going back on the path to doing what they were supposed to be doing anyway. God's people always have problems. They have bumps in the road where they fall off and have to be brought back to what they need to be doing, just like we are. And this is one of those cases. Had Dinah not gone to see the daughters of the land, this wouldn't have happened. Something else might have happened unless Jacob started back on his track. That was going to be the end result somewhere, somehow. Boy, you're a quiet group this morning. No comments? No questions? You all agree? Oh.
I agree, but it seems like the women in this whole family, starting with Sarah and then Rebecca and then Rachel and now then Dinah, they all started things into play that had such horrible consequences. Just, taking control of a situation that was not under their control.
Boy, you leave me an opportunity to say a lot of things that get me in a lot of trouble now. Follow up on that a little bit. One of the, we talked when we were back in some earlier chapters about Lot being a tragic figure. I think Rebecca is one of the most tragic figures in this part of the Bible. She had a favorite son. She went through all kinds of trickery to get him his inheritance and the blessing that was due the older. She had to send him away, and when she sent him away, she said for a little while, he was to go to Haran and find a wife. And we have no evidence that she ever saw him again. We're going to see that even the death of her maidservant was recorded in the Bible. Rebecca's wasn't. She totally disappears from the record. I think that's one of the most tragic episodes here. Anything else? Okay.
Jim, it looks like that the pattern that these people started, if they actually started it, has continued down today. I mean, this is how our problems began, and oftentimes accelerate because we simply don't pay attention to what God tells us to do. He's given us pretty clear instructions. I mean, he doesn't beat us over the head with them, but we do pretty much know how to do things better than what we do. And these people were just forerunners of us, I guess.
Well, I think that's true. And we're going to see this pattern repeated over and over and over again to the ultimate destruction of parts of the group. You know, the northern tribes just basically disappear from history pretty early. And it's all because they don't do the letter of the law. You know, one would think that Jacob would fully understand, with all of the times that God has told him to return to your land and to your family. We can, or at least I can kind of understand his reluctance that he had initially to visit with Esau, not knowing how Esau is going to receive him. But once that went well, it just seems to me like that he would be anxious to see the rest of his family. And yet, for whatever reason, he wants to settle in northern Canaan, which is not where God wanted him. Okay? Let me see what I've skipped here. Okay. Chapter 35, verse 2. And Jacob said to his household and to all who were with him, "Put away the foreign gods that are among you. Purify yourselves and change your garments." Now this harkens back to the fact that when Jacob left Haran, Rebekah took some of the household gods with her. You remember that story where she hid them and when Laban couldn't find them? Apparently it was not only Rebekah that did that, but several other members of the family and the servants who brought household idols with them. And I think I've made this statement before, that it's fairly easy for a person who believes in many gods just to accept another god. So polytheism was common in Haran, and it would be pretty easy for those people to accept Jacob's God as another god, but not give up the ones that they had. It's another thing to accept another god as the only God. And at this point, Jacob is telling his crew to put away all of the foreign gods. And we're going to see as we go through this chapter that there is a forerunner of a lot of the things that are going to be present in the law of Moses. Like here, no foreign gods. Purify yourselves. There were set rules and regulations, especially for the priest, to purify themselves before doing sacrifices. Change your garments. That was also part of the ritual. Then let us arise and go up to Bethel. Bethel is significant because that is the first place that God appeared to Jacob as he was leaving on his way to Haran. It's where he received all of his promises that God would be with him. Then let us arise, go up to Bethel, and I will make an altar there to God, who answered me in the day of my distress, and has been with me in the way which I have gone. So Jacob is at least recognizing here that God has been with him throughout all of the time that he had spent in Haran and on the journey back. So they gave Jacob all the foreign gods which were in their hands, and the earrings which were in the ears, and Jacob hid them under the terebinth tree which was by Shechem. So he buried all of these gods and much of the jewelry that they had acquired. There's some thought that a lot of the jewelry actually came from the sacking of Shechem. Don't know if that's true. And they journeyed, and the terror of God was upon the cities that were all around them, and they did not pursue the sons of Jacob. And what do you think that terror was? Wow. Total silence this morning. There you go.
Oh. Well, you know, sometime when Israel was going around Canaan and conquering, the sight of that many people produced a fear in these people, knowing how big a mass of people was coming. And something here was different in this case, in that they had exacted a revenge against these people. And I'm sure it was I know it was bad. At the same time, the fear that this tribe, if you will, was able to wipe out a whole city would have scared to death anyone else who were around them. And knowing that, I don't know if we could put it in that, knowing that God was with them in this, or was around, or knowing, it would have produced a fear in all the places around them. And I think this is what it's referring to, that they were scared to death, and God helped in that, so that the other people would leave them alone.
I think that's a great comment. This small group, and I can use small, I guess, in relationship to the people around them. But if they knew the small group that had wreaked such vengeance upon the city of Shechem, totally destroyed, killed all the people, sacked the city, took their women, took their children, that would strike fear, especially when you could see that it was a small group that did it. And they journeyed, and the terror of God was upon the cities that were all around them, and they did not pursue the sons of Jacob. So Jacob came to Luz, that is Bethel, which is in the land of Canaan, and he and all the people who were with him. And he built an altar there and called the place El Bethel, because there God appeared to him when he fled from the face of his brother. Now Deborah, Rebekah's nurse, died, and she was buried below Bethel under the terebinth tree. So the name of it was called Alon-Bacuth. Is Rebekah alive at this time? Here we see her nurse, the death of her nurse. What about Rebekah? Well, I don't know either. We just don't know when Rebekah died. I would surmise that she was not alive, that she had already passed away, but we're certainly not told. Then God appeared to Jacob again when he came from Paddan Aram and blessed him. And God said to him, "Your name is Jacob. Your name shall not be called Jacob anymore, but Israel shall be your name." Now we saw that Abraham's name was changed from Abram to Abraham. And in the Bible account, when the name was changed, we always saw in the subsequent naming the new name. I think that occurred in chapter 12. And when you saw a reference to Abraham prior to chapter 12, it was always Abram. After chapter 12, it was always Abraham. But here we see Jacob's name, even after the name change. Frequently he's called Jacob. In fact, I'm going to keep count as we go through here. I'm going to try to, but I believe in the majority of the time he's still referred to as Jacob. I could be wrong. We don't have any record of Isaac's name ever being changed, so that 2 of the 3 patriarchs had their names changed, one didn't. So he called his name Israel. Also God said to him, "I am God Almighty. Be fruitful and multiply. A nation and a company of nations shall proceed from you, and kings shall come from your body." You know, this is a similar type promise that was made to Abraham initially. "The land which I gave Abraham and Isaac, I give to you, and to your descendants after you I give this land." Then God went up from him in the place where he talked with him. So Jacob set up a pillar in the place where he talked with him, a pillar of stone, and he poured a drink offering on it. This is the first time that we've seen something called a drink offering. And we know that that was also a part of the Mosaic law. Poured oil on it, and that's another, we've seen that before, and that continues in the Mosaic law. And God called the name of the place where God spoke with him Bethel. Okay, I'm going to stop there. We start a new thought. Any comments, questions, thoughts? Anybody awake? All right, see you next week.